Okay. So I would say, just looking at the time, that we can maybe slowly get started. I guess some more people will join along the way, but given that we really want to keep it at a crisp power hour, I would say, yeah, let's kick it off officially. So yeah, a very warm welcome to all of you. This is the second edition of our Sustainable Transformers Roundtable. This time I'm not hosting it alone. I'm doing this together with my co-host Andrea from Circular Munich. So yeah, excited that we're doing this together this time. And yeah, welcome to everyone who's joining. And of course, a big thank you to our speakers that you're joining us as well today. And before we kick it off, just a little bit about HYVE and why we're doing this format. So yeah, and also a little introduction about myself. I'm Rebecca. I work as an innovation consultant at HYVE. We're based in Munich and we've been around since 22 years. We have a very interdisciplinary team from researchers, designers, strategists, so we can really help from first ideas and concepts to putting it into products and services and to the market. So we can basically help our clients along the whole innovation process. And two things are really important for us. One is user centricity, to really develop products or services that meet a need. But I think as many companies, we also realize we kind of need to think that further and move from user centricity to planet centricity, to really also think how these impacts and services are actually also for the planet. And the second one is that we really believe in open innovation, and we consider ourselves as enablers to bring together great ideas, interesting and innovative minds. And this is why we're also doing the Sustainable Transformers talks. And each time we choose one industry and exciting speakers out of this industry to really discuss challenging lessons learned and to really inspire one another. And for us, we believe there's a lot of cross-industry learning. So if you are not from the energy industry, I think there will be a lot of learnings, especially given that this topic, I think, is so relevant right now from an economic perspective, but also political perspective. And an investment in renewable energies probably is also an investment in freedom and democracy. So I'm really thrilled that we are having this talk today, because I think it's so relevant. And yeah, we're having really amazing minds to share their expertise with us. And so that's why I'd love to give you a short glimpse into our roadmap for today. So we'll kick it off with Iliana from Siemens Energy. She's a futurist, and she will share some more future topics around that, but also share experiences from her vast expertise in the energy sector. And then hear from Zoltan, he's the CEO from Landwärme, and then rounded up by Florian, the CEO from Polarstern. And in the end, of course, we also want to open it. We have a Q&A and discussion round. And since we know this power hour is, quite dense, we give the option for those who would like to join a little longer, who want to really engage in the longer discussion, to stay this 30 minutes for this virtual after hour. We're very happy if you want to stay and really, seize the opportunity to ask your questions and really engage. For us, it's really important that this is personal and relatable. So we'd love to engage you here as well.
Great. Welcome also from my side. Maybe I also give a short introduction of who I am, and then I give some more insights of how we can interact today. I'm Andrea. I'm all about the topic of circular economy. I'm on the one hand co-founding a startup, which is tackling take-back systems for products. And on the other hand, that's my role today. I'm the co-initiator of Circular Munich, which is an association based here in Munich. And we are trying to drive a circular transition here in the city, which of course involves different actors. And for us, it's super important to shed light on those people who are really creating solutions for a circular economy. And I guess the topic of energy is a really central one. So I'm also really happy that we're able to have 3 great speakers today. And before we jump in there, just some organizational aspects. We're right now in this webinar setting. So that means that you as the attendees are right now on mute by default. I think that's also a good setting to avoid background noises, but of course there are ways for you to interact. So on the one hand, there will be the option to just raise your hand later on and ask questions. So please use that. And of course, while we're having the talks, if some questions are already arising in your head, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we will then really make sure and try to answer as many of them. Yeah, I think that will be a good setting for us. And Rebecca, I think you're doing the intro.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, as I already mentioned, we're super excited to have our experts here. And for a start, I always love to, challenge them to bring an item with them that kind of helps them to introduce themselves. And I hope, Iliana, I think you just said, I hope your internet works right now, because then I would say we start with you ladies first. Let me see. If not, then I would say, yeah, we'll start with you, Sultan, for the introduction. And yeah, happy to hear a little bit about yourself before we then deep dive into your presentation.
Yes. So Sultan, I like my name. I'm CEO and founder of Landwärme. I will talk about the company a little bit later. My background, I was born in Hungary, moved as a child to Germany, grew up in Bavaria. Did quite a lot of academics, so was a technical university in Munich, master in engineering, in electrical engineering, and did a master in business administration. Had also the opportunity to go to Berkeley for one term, and a few years ago I did an executive program in Harvard Business School. So that's my academic background. From the business side, I was always in energy, so starting very early. My first jobs during university were at E.ON, some Stadtwerke, did McKinsey, also mainly in the practice, working on gas and electricity. And so that's my background, yeah.
Cool, thank you for joining today. Then I would say, yeah, Florian, short introduction from your side.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, my name is Florian Henley. I was born in the southern part of Germany, and I grew up in Bavaria. And from my academic background, I did business. So I studied international business in Cambridge and in Landshut. And from after studies, I founded I founded a startup in Switzerland. So I did that for 5 years and focused on clean tech, renewables, but lubricants. So no energy, but energy connection. So I have always also kind of been in the market. And now after that, I founded Green Gas Concepts, which is it's a company that organized a certification scheme for biogas, or invented a certification scheme for biogas, and which is also the nucleus for Polarstern, or was the nucleus. And that was 12 years ago. And since the last 11 years, I built up Polarstern as a green utility in Germany.
Yeah, very impressive backgrounds from both of your sides. I'm just checking in with Iliana if it works. If not, I would say we dive right into the presentations, maybe from your side, Sultan, and then I hope, yeah, internet will work, and then we'll have Iliana on board. Yeah, also in an innovation process, you need to be flexible. So yeah, I would suggest to go forward like this. Yeah, and we're excited for your insights. I think you're sharing quite some also yeah, circular aspects from your expertise in the biomethane industry. So yeah, I'm excited to hear from you. Stage is yours now.
Thank you. Let's get started. Just a second. Now it's working. So, okay. First of all, I'm going to introduce the company and then a little bit more on the topic biomethane. What is that product, and how is it sustainable, and how it is connected with circular economy? Landwärme, we are a biomethane trading company. For those of you who don't know what biomethane is, we are like the renewable currently it's called natural gas, but it's a fossil gas we usually buy from the Russians, but they don't deliver anymore. So we are the renewable replacement for the gas which is consumed here in Europe. And biomethane is produced from organic waste, but you can also use maize or dedicated biomass. You upgrade it to biomethane, and then you can use the gas grid to transport it, usually within Europe, but on the long run, even globally within the LNG infrastructure. And our role in the market we are a trader. So we're kind of a wholesale trader. So we connect the producers, which are usually farmers, but some from the food industry, sometimes municipalities who operate the wastewater treatment and so on, with the different application where it can be used. So usually utilities like Polarstern, who serve private households. We deliver it to every second CNG station in Germany, but also outside of it. And a lot of the biomethane goes into electricity generation, then to produce electricity and combined heat and power. Yeah. Currently, team of over 75 people. Main location is in Munich, but we have also offices in Berlin, Budapest, and Dortmund. And we manage a portfolio of around 3 terawatt hours compared to the natural gas consumption of 800, 900 terawatt hours in Germany. Not that much, but it's at least 30, 35% of the biomethane market. Yeah, that shortly on Landwärme. So what is this biomass and how does it really live up to all this expectation we have to circular economy? Well, first of all, okay, it's energy from nature. It's a bioenergy, so it's mainly based on whatever biomass is available. And there is a wide range of biomass you can use. You can use energy plants, which you can grow dedicated. You can use manure, you can use wastewater. So you can use human shit and so organic waste. So there are very different materials. Mainly what is good for biogas is wet materials. So everything which is really dry and more wooden, it's something you would burn or use in a different path. Everything which is wet and is not suitable to be burned is what really goes very effectively to produce biogas. And from that biogas, you can convert it to biomethane. The production side is very state of the art. So meanwhile, even in Europe, we have several 10,000 plants. Globally, if you go also include the small scale plants, we have several millions. So the technology is very simple because it's mainly like a stomach. So it's fermentating, it's eating, the bacteria are eating this biomass and producing CO2 and methane. And these are the two elements we are using. The digest, because it's just take a little bit out of the biomass you're using. The digest which comes out can be used as organic fertilizer. So all the stuff which is needed to grow plants, nitrogen, sulfur, and so on, it stays in the biomass and goes back to the fields. So you have a very closed circular system because what you take out is mainly the molecules C, H, and O. So all the stuff which the plants get out of the air or out of the water, but all the rest stays there and can be used again. When we upgraded it to biomethane, we can use the grid. That's very good because there is an existing grid and it's a very effective way to transport energy. It's a very cheap way. It's a big invest into the grid to build it up, but at the moment when you have it, it stays there. It's really long lasting. So this is something, and you can use it for very different applications and change the applications over the time. Now what we are adding, and this is now our mission for this decade, is not just to produce biomethane, but to really leverage it. And the leverage we do is by CCS. CCS is carbon capture and storage. And this is a word a lot of people who are involved in energy or climate change issues don't like it because it's very strongly linked to coal. But we think it's the way to go to really create negative emissions, decarbonize the atmosphere, so really get the gigatons of CO2 again out of the atmosphere and store it and bring it back there where it came from. And one of the ways we want to do this is by doing carbon capture. And this you could do at the coal power plant, but that is not very easy, technically complicated, not very economic. But in our case, it's part of our project. So converting biogas to biomethane is mainly getting all the CO2 out of the biogas. And so we have a pure CO2 stream usually at the plants, and now we want to bring it to this final storage. And this can be usually empty gas fields. So we mainly bring back the CO2 where it came from, get it out of the atmosphere again, and close this loop. So we took it out of the decades before somebody took it out. Now we bring the carbon back and hope that helps the climate to restore again. And in a summary, just to show you that I think that the biggest challenge is biomethane doesn't have that global challenge to change everything, and it can be the one global energy source, but it can be the one with the biggest added value, because we have bio waste anyway, we have manure anyway, we have wastewater treatments anyway. We will have always some agricultural residues. So there is always some available biomass, and looked at it globally, with talking about gigatons, which can be used in the existing methane infrastructure to really focus on that applications which are very hard to electrify. This is, for example, where we push now heavy duty, so big trucks, for example, but shipping. Shipping is something, you know, to really move a ship from Shanghai to Europe. This is something which won't be electrified in 50 years. So this is something, it's very good application for bioenergy, but also power and heat generation, especially the peak demand when sun and wind are not there, I think are very good. And what's interesting is the value generation, because all this bioenergy, all these biomethane plants, they are decentral. So they are somewhere out there. They will be spread all over Europe or globally. So it's really value generation for the areas. It's a circular economy because you use the digest again, you bring back all the biomass which goes to the city, comes back without the energy. So this is something where we really can close it. At the same time, the only output is negative emissions where we bring carbon beneath the soil. So this is how we want to live it up, and this is the vision which we push for now, especially in this decade, to make this as a usual case and really be part of all energy concepts globally. And this we won't do alone. You will have a lot of solar power, a lot of wind power. You will have hydrogen next to it, but I think we have to, you know, combine all of these systems. Yeah, that's my insight so far, and open for discussion, or bring it on to Florian to talk about the role a consumer can have.
Yeah, exactly. I think I don't see any questions right now. I think we'll kind of combine the questions in the end. And I'm also very curious, you know, on some of your personal learnings along this whole journey. But yeah, I would suggest to maybe move on to Florian and then finish with you. Liana, happy to see you back here. And then I would say, yeah, I'm sure there will be more questions coming up along the way.
Okay.
Good. Then I'll share my screen and start right away. Does it work?
Yes, perfect.
Okay,
thank you.
Perfect. Great. Thanks. So my slides are in German, but I talk English. I hope I get the transaction. And most of you, I guess, will understand it. So I hope it's okay. Yeah, if you're talking about energy and the energy market, and if you say that we want to change the world with energy, you should know what do you have to change and maybe why. And I hope for the most of you, it's quite obvious what the why. Right now, the way we live, especially in the Western parts, and this is for the whole year, this is for the whole world. So for us, it's even worse. The way we live and the way we use and consume resources, we would need 3.5 Earths, and obviously that can't be good on the long run, or can't work on the long run. And one of the main reasons for that is the way we produce energy and the way we use energy. And so it's the energy market, and obviously the fossil energy market is one of the main main reasons why we have the problems we're having right now with climate change, but also with the fight for resources, which is also always has been and always will be one of the main reasons for, let's say, tensions, international tensions. And but the good answer is that the energy market is one of the main reasons, but it's also one of the main drivers and one of the key solutions we have to change that, to get back to one Earth, to get in circular economies, as Sultan already described, for example. And my idea now is to give you just a spark, a brief glimpse what is possible, especially talking about the energy market in urban areas. So I introduced you a solution, how we could, or how the energy market will be in future, and an idea how it already exists right now. And we call it Mieterstrom, which is kind of tenant energy or tenant electricity, which the idea is that the energy you have and the energy you use, because we need energy and we will, even in future, we'll need even more energy, but we have to produce it clean. So, and clean means renewable, and it means also decentral. And this is what we can do, and which is very efficient, and especially in urban areas. So what you want to do, or the idea is behind the whole thing, or the whole systems, to produce the energy exactly where it's needed. Obviously renewables, obviously clean. And so if you go to cities, to bigger buildings, etc., and then you build you produce energy mainly from PV, solar, so solar modules, and you use the energy directly in the building or directly in the quarters. So it just depends how huge you see the whole system. And the thing is, maybe one step back, the energy market right now is very separated. So you have the electricity markets, you produce electricity and you use it for the typical electric things. And then you have the mobility market, mainly powered by combustion engines. And then you have the heating market, which is in Germany mainly a fossil powered market. But the energy market of the future and it's going mainly, it's not all electric, but many things going electric, which means that it's not only the television or our computer we power electric, or which we use electricity for, but also for our heating and also for mobility with EV cars. And it's very good, because then that's a way we can quite easily produce the energy directly where it's needed. Where, for example, if you need a fuel, you can't produce it at home, right? But you can produce electricity with the PV modules on your own home. And this is exactly the idea which is behind this tenant electricity. Produce the idea, as I said, directly where it's needed, and to couple these different sectors, to produce green electricity, to use it for heating the house with heat pumps, but also to put it in battery storages, to power the normal house, and obviously also charge your EV car. And by having all these whole systems, and by managing them intelligently, the energy is much more cheaper than the normal grid supply. So right now, for example, we produce the kilowatt hour in such kind of buildings for about 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you buy the electricity now from the new contract over the grid, it's 50 cents. So this kind of energy supply is 5 times cheaper than the normal supply over the grid. And it's more resilient, and it's also green. So it's a very, very good, very interesting way to really power houses and to make your own houses to kind of green power plant. And this is what we do all over Germany. And with more than 250, 300 projects already running in this kind of energy supply. And if you think that this energy kind of which works in this kind of energy supply which works in tenant buildings also works for bigger areas. So it's this is and it's a blueprint for the energy market of the future. So we have to combine, and then we are also very independent from other countries. We have to produce more electricity, green electricity. We couple the electricity, the heating market, also of course heating is also cooling market, and the EV market, and then we have a very, very cheap and very efficient and clean energy system. So we have it. We know we have the technology, we have the knowledge, we have everything where we just have to do it. We didn't do it the last 20 years, let's do the next 20 years. And this is also, so I just changed it around. What we do at Polarstern as a green utility, which we have always been doing from the very beginning. So the understanding or in the market is that to bring new technologies, green technologies, and especially ways of supplying energy to the people in urban areas. And I was beforehand, I was also asked to give an idea about the kind of journey. And to be honest, at the very beginning, so when 11, 12 years ago, it was quite hard. And there was also already green electricity, so Ökostrom in the market, but there was no real biogas in the market for the end consumers. And there were also not these kind of models so that even tenants can produce and use their own energy, and not even to think about EVs. And when we started that 10 years ago, people, they liked us. They liked us and they liked the idea, but they kind of, they didn't really take us serious. And, but we started because we are convinced that we have to do something. And I don't want to tell my 3 boys I have at home that I was in the market and I knew it and I didn't do anything. So that's why from the very first beginning at Polarstern, we always try to bring these new products, new kind of tariffs, etc., in the market. And this Mieterstrom, when we introduced 2015, which is now 7 years ago, nobody even knew it. And now it's a huge market. There's a special regulation for that, and we're the market leader. But at the very beginning, we didn't even know if there was a business model. We just wanted to show that something is possible. And we're quite successful. Also got these kind of innovation awards, etc. But at the end, it always looks quite easy and fun and all the glamour, but the way to that never was easy. And now we have the energy crisis. So new challenges ahead.
Good, fine. Thanks for sharing your insights. I really also liked what you said with more or less we have what we need. We have just to start doing it. So maybe that's a good point where we can also discuss on later. And now let's see, Ilyana, are we ready? Can we do your input? Is your internet working?
Definitely. I think hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, Andrea. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for your patience. For some reason, it was all working fine. And then everyone started joining and it stopped working. So do apologize for that. But great to be here. And thanks sort of Florian and Zoltan for just jumping in here. Unfortunately, I think I still have some issues with the presentation. So unless I think you guys over there or Rebecca sharing the screen right now, so do appreciate that. Thanks, Rebecca. So I'm a bit of an intro, I suppose, seeing that I've missed that. I'm Millie, and I currently sort of work for Siemens Energy. I've been working for Siemens Energy for the last 9 months of my life, which has been a long one. I will not say that in years. And for those of you who don't know much about Siemens Energy, we are a sort of a company that focuses on energy, as it's in the name, basically the whole value chain from generation all of the way down to sort of the customer level. But the truth is that today I don't really want to talk to you about Siemens Energy, but a bit about the energy transition and a bit of my personal views, adding to what has already been said by the previous 2 speakers, to hopefully drive some questions. So please, start putting some questions on, because I always find that that's the most interesting part of the conversation. So when people tend to talk about decarbonization and the energy transition, they tend to focus on generation. So 2 areas of the conversation seems to be the electrification of society. So Florian sort of touched upon this, right? Which is electrifying absolutely everything and anything that we can see. And also green hydrogen, which is effectively the creation of a gas, hydrogen, through the use of renewables. However, a new study earlier this month showed that even if we stopped fossil fuels today, there would still be 42% chance that temperatures will exceed the 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And if we didn't stop until 2030, the chance of us missing our target would increase to 66%. This means that if you press the next button, we need to start looking at other areas of the energy transition and other areas for decarbonization, not only just from a generation perspective, but what else we can look at. So we need to sort of change our perspective on the problem. And what hopefully you've seen here now is that the 3 bats that were previously sleeping are now fully energized and dancing in a nightclub. So if we move to the next one to talk a bit about some of the 2 big challenges, right? So when we are out of space, for those of you who don't know, there you can see 2 man-made constructions only. One is the Wall of China, and the other one is the electricity network. You can see it both at day and night, but this is effectively what it looks like at night. And hopefully this puts a bit of a perspective on the challenge. So yeah, so when we go, feel free to go to the next one. So energy accounts for 30% of global CO2 emissions. What this means is that if we want to convert all of the electricity you've previously seen to green sources, we need to effectively build 1,500 wind turbines a day globally to achieve net zero, and 6,200 gigawatts of solar per year, all of the way up to 2030, up to 2035. So we need to look at other sources of generation as well. And here you see a couple. But hopefully what you see in all of these, and the last one I know sort of is direct carbon capture from the atmosphere. But hopefully what you see is that it needs a lot of construction. So everything that we do in terms of generation needs a lot of infrastructure development, whether that's putting generation at sea, whether that's increasing what we can get out of wind, whether that means hydrogen production. It all means assets, it all means materials, and it all means time. And that, of course, from a sustainability perspective and materials perspective and a wider environmental perspective has a lot of connotations. So what I want to sort of quickly sort of talk about as well today is the other side of the issue, which is the demand, which is the next slide. So here, what we have is a couple of areas, right, that are driving changes in demand and electricity and energy usage. One Florian touched upon earlier is transport, and that accounts for 15% of the total carbon footprint globally today. Transport, of course, is not just road transport, which is what many governments and people are talking about today, but it's also air flight transport and, of course, shipping and all of the associated infrastructure. And what we mean by when do we connect to the electricity and energy networks and move the electricity around. The second area, which is sometimes not spoken as much as I think we should, is digital technologies. So they are responsible for only 4% of greenhouse gas emissions today, but its energy consumption is increasing by 9% a year. And it's not only the energy consumption, but unfortunately, over 20% of the communications industry cannot be recycled. And this creates a huge amount of technology waste that does impact the environment at large. It's also a growing problem. So normally digitization, as said, seems to be seen as the answer for decarbonization, or one of the answers, but we also need to understand the downside of it, which is the energy and the heat it generates. The third, of course, is agriculture, and we've touched upon that today, and that accounts for 18% of carbon emissions. And much of it is, again, being electrified, driving the requirement for that energy infrastructure up. So ways of trying to reduce the growth in these areas is really important. And then, of course, comes buildings, which accounts both commercially and residential for 6% of carbon emissions. And the last one, which cuts across the whole industrial, and sorry for the background noise, I'm also babysitting with 2 daughters. So there's 2 girls in the background. That accounts for 27% of the total emissions. And I want to touch upon this today from a sustainability perspective, because there's 4 materials that account for 60% of all emissions and also drive and are required for the decarbonization of generation. And these are steel, cement, aluminium, and chemicals. They account for 7.1 gigatons of CO2 emission a year. And we need to reduce the demand of these. 56% of the total demand is in this area, is in the decarbonization of construction and infrastructure. So sustainability and circularity is key for the energy transition. We need to figure out how we can recycle and reuse everything we are currently not requiring, and how can we recycle and reuse the current energy infrastructure to help us deliver the future energy infrastructure in a timely fashion. So that's really sort of some of the insights I wanted to sort of put out there today to hopefully spark some of the conversations we are having right now. So really looking forward to putting to your questions and concerns and challenges online. So please feel free to participate. It'll be great to hear your views. Yeah, sorry, I was just looking at time and just jumped that one, thinking that I'm already behind schedule.
Great. So thanks for sharing your insights. I really love that we have super different perspectives on this topic. And I guess you going last, Iliana, was also a really nice point of bringing all together and giving like the big view. Maybe from my side, first of all, please feel free to post more questions in the chat, or I guess we also have the opportunity that you raise your hand and then you can just speak up because I think we're all interested in having a good conversation. But maybe from my perspective, coming from the circular space, I'm also really feeling like we're talking a lot about energy, and it's always kind of this intangible, like energy coming out of the, like in the house, out of the charger. But I really like your point, Iliana, with the infrastructure, because in the end, like it's tangible. You said it's assets, it's materials, it's things that we have to build. It takes time, but it's then out there. And I really liked, I think there are some first approaches to reuse materials from wind turbines. I just read about a project in Spain. What do you like? What's the potentials there, and where is the industry? Is there even an awareness for this topic, and that we have to also be more resource aware with regards to the infrastructure, or like what's the dynamic that you see?
Great question, Andrea. And I suppose just from that perspective, just throwing it out there to all of the entrepreneurs online, this is a growing area for you. There is the awareness. There's definitely the awareness, especially if you consider, the transmission assets, the electricity transmission assets have an average life expectancy of 45 years, and many of them are 80 years plus. So we're not only talking about new infrastructure, but also replacing the old one. And when we look at offshore technologies, they normally have a life expectancy of 20-25 years, which also means a lot of it is starting to come to the end of life, whilst at the same time, what we put today in 2020 will need to be replaced by 2040, 2045. So it is a huge challenge, which has been increased, of course, by the material issues and suffered through the COVID, right, in terms of moving materials around, and now, of course, the current geopolitical situation. So the industry is definitely trying to catch up as to how do we quickly recycle and reuse these materials, building facilities that can cope with this, and trying to understand how best to do it. But as I said at the beginning, I think this is an incredibly large area of development where any new ideas and new ways of looking at things would be greatly appreciated, not only by me, but I think the whole global industry. So yeah, any views and ideas are there for grabs.
Yeah, I think there was also one question from one participant asking you if you could share the full split of the CO2 sources that you referred to in your quick presentation.
You too?
The CO2 sources.
Oh, the CO2 sources. Yeah, of course. So let's see. The first one shows transport around 15%. Like, clearly, if you go online, right, you'll see them varying, right? So please, like, don't quote me as being gospel. Digital is around 4%. Agriculture is around 18%. Buildings and commercial is around 6%. And industry is around 27%. So what people might sometimes hear talk about, especially sort of, I come from the UK before joining Siemens Energy and coming to Germany 9 months ago, people talk about the challenge with heat. And heat is a mixture of both commercial and residential, as well as industrial, if that makes sense. But like, if anyone wants further detail, like, feel free to catch up with Rebecca and Andrea, and happy to sort of talk about this offline. Really, it's sort of a hobby of mine, so feel free.
Mm-hmm. And maybe one quick question from my side. I mean, since you also had hydrogen in there, I once heard that, I mean, hydrogen is only kind of renewable if it's really green hydrogen, and it should be used like champagne, you know, only for specific cases, since it's quite also energy intensive to transport and prepare it. So what's your take on that?
Great. So just to reiterate, the views in this call are my views and my views alone. So this is the way I see things. We have a huge gas network, so we have lots of pipes underground that can be reused. Some can be reused more than others, but if we manage to get it reduced, being able to reuse them, gas is something that you can also store. So you can store gas. The key thing for me around gas, and you touched upon it, Rebecca, is that it needs to be renewable. And for it to be renewable, it needs to be generated from renewable sources. And right now, in an interconnected grid where we still have a lot of dirty generation, this is very difficult to prove. Also, when we look at the financial business case right now, they don't always make sense. So the business cases are not quite there yet in terms of leveraging the constraint of the electrical network to create hydrogen whilst maintaining your electrolyzer working at 100% of the time, 365 days, which is the only way of making the electrolyzer financially viable. So I completely agree with your statement. It should be used currently, or it should be looked right now from an electricity mix as something that supports decarbonization, but is by far not the silver bullet, which I hear some people think it is. But again, the caveat there, these are my personal views.
Great. Yeah, maybe catching up on that, there's one more question, but maybe that could also be something that maybe Sultan can answer. Like, first of all, like a question from the chat, why are not all gas lines used? That's one question. And maybe a connecting question from my side. Sultan, you already said, like, it's right now really, like, gas is a topic we all know. We do have some issues there right now, and there's definitely a huge potential for the biomethane you're producing. How can it be used? What is needed? And do you see a raised interest right now in your solution and your product?
We see it for sure raised interest, especially after the war in Ukraine started. A lot of people, you know, the board called somebody at sourcing, you know, let's switch to biomethane or something like that. So they called us, they got a pricing, yeah, never heard back. So there was just a short idea it could be cheaper. I think we see a big move on a European level. There have been now the new targets in REPowerEU, which is mainly setting 35 BCM of biomethane until 2030, and I think 10 or 20 million tons of hydrogen also for 2030, which comes up to the 10 million tons of hydrogen, same energetic value as the 35 BCM, so a billion cubic meters. So we have both of the gases which help us to be more renewable, which help us to be more independent. And it's very nice they are pushed at the same strength and the same speed. Regarding perhaps the discussion we had here before with what to use the hydrogen for, I think the biggest impact if you use hydrogen, the application where we use hydrogen today. So if we have green hydrogen, we should apply it there where we use already green hydrogen today, which is usually produced from natural gas. So in a second where we switch the chemical industry to really green hydrogen, we save that natural gas, we have to import less, and the challenge to transform the natural gas supply to 100% renewable gets easier because we don't have to produce as much methane as it consumes today. The same other application which is very hopeful is like to replace coal in the steel industry. Because so these are two aspects where we really should focus on in the first decades because it's the most economic ways to use hydrogen and they have the biggest impact. And if we then afterwards still have too much hydrogen, there will be all the other applications where we can start to blend it and we can start to, first of all, generate electricity back again because it's just a big storage we can do with that. But I think the issue is not to find good applications for hydrogen, but to really get the industry started and really focus on that million tons of hydrogen we are already consuming in the European Union to turn that green. And this is something which can be done in a very short time because these are central industrial applications, big modules. So this is something easy to start on. I think that could be the breakthrough for the industry. What was the other question regarding the grids? Didn't get that right.
Yeah, there was a small question like why, because I think Jana said right now not all gas grids or lines are used fully, and there was the question like, is there a reason why are they not used?
What we see is more on the, what you have to know is on the international, so really long distance transportation grids. On the long run, flows are changing. So Germany used to be supplied mainly from UK and Netherlands. Now UK is not even able to export any more gas. Netherlands too. So the supply systems change. We used to now we used to import natural gas via the Ukraine. Now we don't use that pipe anymore because the Russian stopped it. So there are more on the intercontinental levels or the continental levels pipelines, which are big, which have big capacities, which could be used for really connecting big areas. Because if you just pick out one of these lines, and usually they are not just, they are redundant lines. So if we talk about Nord Stream 1 and 2 lines, we're talking about Nord Stream 2, again 2 lines. So you have always multiple gas pipelines. And if we see that we don't need the full capacity, you could switch one of them to a different gas. And that would be from my side, hydrogen in some cases to really connect industrial areas with, I don't know, offshore wind in North Sea. And the other one would be for CO2. So all the CO2 we are capturing, industrial application in biomethane production or wherever, has to be transported somewhere to the offshore sites. And that would be a good case to reuse this gas pipelines, which are capable of work for the next decades or even centuries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for this great explanation. And there are more and more questions coming in, which is really nice that you're also participating. There's one more to Diana, but I guess maybe some of, maybe Florian, you could also add your senf to it, how we say in German. So are there examples you would mention as worth replicating of policies or initiatives that public or private organizations are putting in place at the moment, referring to your recommendation of further reduce and recycle?
It'll be great to see what Florian has to say. I mean, there's some great, there's lots of great examples around recycling and reusing. Many of them that come to mind are not in the energy industry, right? So I think having moved here to Germany, I think the sort of reuse and recycles social aspect of it is incredible, right? Like I've never lived in a country where people just leave the stuff they no longer need outside their house and people come and reuse it and take it away, right? So that for me at a social level is absolutely incredible and absolutely what we need to do, right? And people might potentially, for example, laugh at this, but hey, all of this has a huge impact into manufacturing and what we need to manufacture and sort of reusing materials, clothing, general stuff, right? That we all think at an individual level, it doesn't make any difference, but some of these industries that we help grow with our consumption habits are really the ones where we can make a significant impact. So I suppose that's one thing around sort of reusing and social aspects. And I know someone there also mentioned something that we should be talking more about the human factor. So driving that in, I think it's absolutely incredible. But there's others around reusing copper on sort of communications, right? As you upgrade communication systems to fiber optics, you pull the copper links from the ground. And I know sort of Germany has now a very big program around this. We can just pull the copper out of the ground and reuse all of that. So those are two that come to mind, but I'm sure Zoltan and Florian also have some great ideas and sort of great examples, probably better than mine, most probably better than mine.
Do you want to add something, Florian or Zoltan?
I think we
Yes.
should also see the aspects of the infrastructure which don't have to be recycled, because if I think about the wind turbine, you have very different aspects. You have perhaps the wings, which have to be, there is a technological development and so on. And at some point you have to replace them, but then you have the site, you have all the concrete which was used to build the site, the fundamentals of the site. And this is something which can be used by the next generation and over the next generation. And you can base on that. I think people should always look at okay, what does this site look in 50 years? Is it possible to upgrade it, to bring it on the next level, to continue to produce here, to reuse the grid connection. These are aspects which are also very important if you don't have to do all the civil works there anymore. And I think this is an important aspect to create energy systems which are renewable. This means they can run forever, to create sites which can be there as long as the technology is not really completely disturbed, continue to produce there for the next hundreds of years. So that's one aspect people should also include in their projects. Florian.
Good point. I think Florian,
Yes.
you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm playing the end consumer role in this panel, or the perspective, and therefore I think it's what is a very good movement is, for example, the refurbishment of the digital infrastructure, like the computers or your mobile phones or so. And for example, in our company, we're using reused mobile phones or refurbished mobile phones, and I think that has it's coming more and more, and it's an important impact. And one thing we also should always have in mind is that if we are going more electric, I'm not saying all electric, but more electric, and which means more battery. It also means that the batteries, they're not just produced one time, but they have a very interesting cycle of usage. So for example, if they're in the car or in the mobile phone, which is a quite heavy use for a battery, because it needs a lot of, not a lot of power, then after that it can be, especially in a car battery, it can be reused in households for another 10 to 20 or 30 years, and then after that it can be recycled. And so and we have to keep that in mind, that of course, for example, because there was this about these EVs and the biogas question, that's why I'm raising that also a bit, or I'm touching it a bit, and that with batteries, I think they have bad sides still. Talking about the materials we need and etc., or cobalt, for example, but they're already technologies that they don't need, for example, cobalt anymore, and they don't need, how do you call it, Salzen Erden, and all the bad stuff that is in the battery anymore, the most of the bad stuff, and then you can still recycle it. So from a technological perspective, these technologies, as Sultan said, like think different, think in longer circles, and inventing batteries, going more electric. It's not, there's so much R&D still going on, and there's so much invention still going on. And so we will have a lot of progress, so giving us much more power and making the technologies more clean and more lasting. And it really brings us much closer to a circular economy, for example, compared to combustion engines.
Yeah, very good point. I think someone also just commented, Günther, that mobile phones are stored in the drawers of private personen. Meanwhile, it's a big landfill of electronics. I guess that comes back to a lot of users not really knowing that there's even possibilities out there in terms of refurbishment and everything. And I mean, Florian, you also mentioned it was quite a journey for you. How did you maybe also see the change in terms of consumer and education and what you can do out there and solutions coming up? So what's your take on that?
Sustainability and the awareness of that everybody can do or has the obligation to do something yourself, and start at your own house or behavior or consumption. It's growing. It's much growing compared to 10 years ago, but still we're so too far away. As Liliana said, even if we stopped emitting CO2 right now, we're not sure we're going to make it, or if we would make it, because we won't stop it right now. And it's the same with our behavior. So like our own behavior of eating, how much animals we eat, meat we eat, the way we travel, etc. So I'm not the prophet for not consuming anything anymore, etc. But we really, it's not enough just to buying organic, and it's not enough just to have a green electricity at home. We really have to, I'm sorry if that's too pathetic or so, but we have to change our consumer consume behavior, and everybody, and it doesn't mean that you have to change everything, but really we have to change. And I could tell you what, but I think most of you know, you can start by banking, electricity, so the way you use energy, the way you travel, the way you eat, the way, how often do you need really new clothes, and where should they be produced, etc. Okay.
There's definitely options out there, yes.
Yeah.
And I think the vision should be, because what we see is we kind of, we're stealing the fossil energy from Mother Earth on one side, or from future generation or whatever, and put it into senseless products. And because somebody mentioned here Elon Musk and so on, so much money is spent, and if you compare it really with what energy transition costs, and they're spending it for yachts and private jets, and if you really add up these numbers, and Oxfam and so have done some research on that, this is really shaming, because if you just, they would stop 10 years producing yachts and start to produce windmills and so on. We could electrify half of the world renewable. And then we would reach a level where it doesn't matter if you turn on the light or not, because it's at the moment where we really come to 100% renewable and we do a little bit more, we can start growing again in a economic, in a circular way. It's a slower growth, but it's something which is then sustainable and will stay there forever. And we have to reach that point and go away from taking all that fossil credit from Earth and hope that it's going to be better in 5 or 10 years because some technology comes around.
Good point. Maybe one other interesting question, talking about circular economy approaches. Or did you want to add, Florian?
No,
Okay.
I wanted to clap.
Yeah, we should do them more often, show that we're having the same view. One question from a cradle to cradle perspective, so also circular approach. There's a question asking, we should not see CO2 as a problem, but as a resource. Are there more perspectives than capturing and storing to use it? Is there any more, or do you see potentials there? Or maybe what's your general opinion on this topic?
We are first using it before we store it, for sure. We are now really changing this industry. We have countries like Netherlands and UK where carbon usage from a biomethane plant is a little bit more advanced than in Germany. And with 10 or 15 plants there, they changed already the whole CO2 usage part, which used to come mainly from fossil sources. So I was really ashamed to hear that, there's so many possibilities to capture CO2 somewhere. And Linde has dig the ground somewhere, I think east of Vienna. They're taking CO2 out of the soil. They have it's like a gas field. They're using fossil CO2. Could leave it there, but now they take it out because it's cheap and clean from a chemical point of view. Now we're gonna change the industrial aspect. So everywhere where CO2 is used industrially, it's gonna be 100% from the atmosphere. So this is the first aspect. It's very easy for us because until now it has a price. They have to pay ETS price or something. So we are really competing good on that. And that's going to happen within the next 3 or 4 years, because for that we need around 50 biomethane plants. CO2 out of them is enough to completely flood the CO2 market. And after that, we will find some places in the chemical industry where they need a C. So if you want to produce plastic or as good plastic, whatever, and you want to do it renewable, then you need some carbon and you need some hydrogen. The hydrogen can be green, can come from PV or wind, and the carbon part can come from biomethane or some other biomass source. But even then, the demand, we talked with the chemical industry, they see it somewhere in a range, at least for Germany, of 3 or 4 million tons of carbon they need for all the industrial application, all the plastic we see around. And but the potential we have, what we can do with CCS and biogas, in Germany is around 30 to 40 million tons, in the European Union 150. So big parts of the CO2 will be stored, but storing is much more expensive than use it in a product. So I think the industry will move into the right direction, and we can force out any fossil carbon source. May it be natural gas is used today, or in some parts crude oil and so on.
Yeah, but I think that's a great question, like seeing CO2 maybe even as a commodity, and what you explained, how it could be used. I even heard that it can be used for diamonds, even used to feed fish or something. So I guess there's a lot of use cases out there that aren't even talked about a lot. Just with looking at the time, I would, just to respect, the participants' time, would just plan in the power hour, just to give you, a big thank you that you joined. We, will still have it going on here until 6, since there's so many more questions, but just for those who are leaving, thank you for being with us today, and for joining, for asking all these questions. For those who need to go, we of course also want to let you go freely, but yeah, thanks for joining. If you want to participate in one of these talks, or if you know someone who should be an expert in another talk, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you, and wish you a great rest of your day. Thank you that you're with us. So just for those who might need to leave, but of course we still want to leverage the chance to have some more questions for those who still have time to stay.
Maybe one thing that I really want to ask, also from a perspective of circularity in cities, maybe Florian, that's a question for you. For example, the city of Munich is really aiming right now to establish way more neighborhoods and think more in terms of circular and sustainable neighborhoods. What opportunities do you see here in terms of, also as you also are following a decentral approach and with the tenant energy, etc.? What are the potentials from like bringing decentral energy into neighborhoods, also to maybe transform neighborhoods and maybe also raise awareness around sustainability? Is there a link? Is that a driver that you see? Yeah.
Sure. Wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Because, okay. Something changed in the something. Okay. Yeah, sure. If you're thinking more in neighborhoods and like in quarters, so parts of cities, so and then you have a quite efficient way of producing energy and using energy, and the way which I described, and these neighborhoods, so the more modern neighborhoods, they often are more the kind of sharing neighborhoods. So they share cars, for example, and they share spaces, and they share electricity or produce electricity. So it really connects quite well. And also these neighborhoods are often more green. And if you're talking about PV on roofs, it doesn't mean there's no green on the roof, for example. So we have green. You have a green roof and the PV on top of that. So it all fits and matches quite together quite well. So it's brother and sister.
And I think what they should also think is on the regional aspect, because there are some aspects where if you think about the carbon cycle, so people are consuming food, it comes from the region. You can produce parts of it in the city, but you will, as we have always done in history, you need a little bit of agriculture, which is outside, and to really connect it in a circular economy, that we are using the sources regionally, and we bring back the biomass to them, the bio waste or the wastewater or whatever, but at least they get most of the molecules they send to the city, that we get back in one way or the other, as bio waste or as the wastewater we are creating. So there you can really close the loop, and you have mainly some carbon flows and energy flows between the city and the area outside. And it also can be used to store energy there, or produce some energy which cannot be produced in the city.
Exactly, and even more if you're thinking about closing circles, and yeah, then you can even so these neighborhoods, they might even produce parts of their own vegetables there, and or maybe even their own fishes. And if you just, because it's not so strange or not so not so future to combine renewable electricity and with fishes and tomatoes, for example, and in circular systems. So, and the energy you produce there, you consume the vegetables, obviously, directly there, and you have the waste from the fishes that are good for the plants, etc. So all these and even in-house greenhouses, we have all that. So just thinking about a bit further, so you can, talking about neighborhoods, you could realize very close circles with very small distances, and the rest you have, as Sultan said, it's you can close it then regionally if you can't close it locally.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's also what in the food context, they talk a lot in the context of circular economy, thinking in urban and peri-urban areas. So really the areas around the cities are kind of there. The flows can really go inside and outside. And if you think that as a closed system, it can be a huge opportunity. And therefore I really like, I don't know, like how you see it, like that are all listening, but I really like when you started energy, you can really see how holistic this topic is, because it touches so many other areas of mobility, of food, of society. And I really like that discussion and understanding that it's a super complex system, but things are connected. And if you like drive, maybe energy is really kind of an enabler. If you rethink those systems, maybe also other things can be impacted in a positive way. So that's really a nice learning that I will definitely take from today's discussion.
I think one of this aspect, if you bring it on a global level, could be that, like if you think back in this desert tech ideas and so on, is, and this would be my wish, like for something in 20 years from now, you could set up a biomethane site somewhere where, I don't know, Africa. And it can be integrated part of their local agriculture. And they are producing negative emissions. So they would have something, formation there to store CO2. And this is a global service that they are delivering, because it doesn't matter where you capture the CO2. You can do it in Munich in your neighborhood, or you do it where it's more cost effective globally. And you can redirect completely cash flows. So this is then just, you enable this area, which can be anywhere in the world, because they have two products that are generating negative emissions. So you don't have to have any logistics if you have somewhere in the area, local side, where you can store it underneath the earth. And it's mainly traded whatever CO2 credits are then available. So it can really generate a global industry of people building up renewable sites, doing direct air capture, doing CCS with biomass. But it could be something with global value chain, and where I think the first world could pay back the loan they had, because we were like the first to take all the natural resources from the earth, and then we have to pay it back in some way. And this would be really paying back for this negative emissions and paying for generations for taking out the carbon of the air. And this could be a big momentum and big chance for humanity to really rearrange economies, because it's going to be something which will go on for centuries, that we are taking out carbon of the atmosphere. And this could be something which could bring global wealth to different regions, because you don't need much infrastructure for just taking CO2 out of the atmosphere.
I really like what Sultan has just said. I think it touches upon a comment that another participant made around reaching Mars, and whether sort of the big financial titans had given up on Earth. I think it needs us to reevaluate, right? How as a society we value things. So it's definitely not just an energy challenge. it's a societal challenge,
Yep.
right? It's how we engage with energy and how we engage with our lives, and that has to change.
Maybe just adding another angle to it, since we're discussing, about the globalization view, and in your inspirational talk, Florian, you also mentioned, with some renewable energies, we can also become more independent. Is there any scenario where you see Germany or the EU becoming, completely independent in itself, or is that not possible?
It is possible. It's just a question if it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, now we are talking about being more independent, and obviously we're too dependent from Russia. But it's not always, also at home, but also in a European perspective, it's not about being 100% independent. It's just not to depend on others. Yeah. And so to be resilient, I think resilience is much more important. Could we be, from an energy perspective, could we be independent? Yes, we could.
And I think the other aspect is we shouldn't try to push 100% renewable in every area, because 100% independence is very expensive. Ask whatever island is around there. Go to Madeira or something and ask them how electricity grid is running there, and it's really complicated. And they're much higher electricity costs, and it's much more complicated to be independent and then even be renewable if you're a small island. Secondly, I think the last tons we want to save in emissions are too expensive. If we're now looking, for example, aviation, yes, it has its part, but it's not the biggest part, but it's for sure one of the most expensive CO2 we are saving. So aviation, if we really want to save it by generating renewable fuels, by fuels and stuff, we're talking about saving cost of 1,000 euros per ton of CO2. And on my part, for example, with biomethane, but also some other technologies doing direct air capture, well, for the same money, we can take 8 to 10 tons out of the atmosphere. So perhaps it's okay that 2050 we're still running and flying on fossil fuel, because at the same time, the money you pay with the ticket price is financing so many projects which are taking out CO2 out of the atmosphere. So we have to also think globally in an effective way, and not to push too much into 100% of everything in independence or renewable, but to find the most effective way to solve this problem we have now and to be independent, reliant. Yes.
I suppose that the one caveat I would say, Sultan, to what you've said is around the carbon credits argument. So I think sometimes lots of people use carbon credits to greenwash, right?
Yes.
And air flight is one of these areas. So I completely agree. We need to focus our efforts, but at the same time, I would caveat that the way people use carbon credits also needs a bit more thought, right?
Yes.
To avoid this whole greenwashing around that area. I fully agree with what Florian has said around resiliency and reliability versus independence. If we become fully independent, then this is a huge geopolitical risk, right? It suddenly becomes a weakness of a nation to be fully independent. So there's nothing wrong around interconnection. It's around social and morally correct interconnection, right? I suppose that's the two sort of things I would like to add to what Florian and Zoltan have said, which clearly they are experts in this area.
Perfect. And just looking at the time, maybe as a final roundup, I think what would be nice is maybe if the three of you could maybe share, if like in 2 to 3 sentences, like the things that you really want to have our audience as main takeaways. Like if you need to pin it down as kind of your last words here, what would it be that you would really like to take everyone away who joined this call today? Do you want to go first, Iliana?
Yeah, of course, I can start. So, I mean, what I would hopefully like the audience to get out of this is they've heard 2 great entrepreneurs who are running 2 incredible businesses, right? This is a growing area. I mean, not only from an entrepreneur's perspective financially, right? And there's a huge amount of corporate venture capital investment going into this, but it is also an area that has a huge amount of challenges that need to be solved. And these are challenges that need to be solved, not only for us, least of all for us, but for all of the future generations to come. So this is really and truly the biggest challenge we will ever face. And it needs to be solved within our lifetimes. So I think there is no more important problem to solve than it is the decarbonization of society. And that clearly people can make a successful impact and live from it, right? We've got two great examples here. So I would really encourage everyone to look into this and help us fight this fight.
I have some short thank you first for all the credits, Ileana. That's very nice. So we keep on fighting. And I think if you just keep in mind that we don't have a technology, it's not a technology, horrible. It's not a technical thing. So we have all the knowledge, so technological thing. We have all the knowledge. It's a mental blockade we have. And the mental thing, the way we see things, that's what we have to change. And I know it's very hard, but I think it's a very good message. So it's just on us. So on our mental, if we want, we can do it.
Yeah, and try to top it a little bit. I think this is our last chance. The crisis currently we have is a big chance because if we miss another decade, we're gonna be at the point that there's not gonna be resources for being renewable or decarbonized because we have to take all resources in adaptation. So I think this is the last chance we have, and it's not just to go entrepreneurial, but at the end we have to really, fight radical for it on a political level and really take this issue very importantly, because we lost the last decade because some fossil companies wanted to do a little bit more profit, and we could be much for further in the European Union and so on. And we lost that chance, and we should really start to talk about responsibility for the last decade and look very strongly on what we can do in this decade.
Amazing. Thanks all for sharing. I really love the point that we said, like, it's a huge challenge, but there's also huge chances. And I think that's the important message. Really finding solutions, starting doing and implementing what we already have. I think that's, a message that I personally really love. And I think a lot of people can relate to. So therefore, I would say, let's round it up. Rebecca, should we share our short ad of upcoming events, because that's something that is quite dear to my heart. Therefore, I'm happy to have the chance to share that. If some of you want to engage and do more, here is one opportunity. We have in September the Circular Futures Festival upcoming. So for everyone engaged in circular economy or interested, there's definitely an opportunity to take part. So you can just sign up to it. And there's still also the opportunity to hand in, because that's really a collaborative festival. So you can hand in inputs, you can talk about what you're doing, about your entrepreneurial or your projects in academics, etc. And as you can see, there are a lot of partners involved. Circular Munich will also organize a Munich-based local event. So if you're interested to join there, let us know. And I think that's exactly also our spirit, like bring together those people who really want to change systems and things, and therefore, might be a good closing point. And I can just say I really loved your inputs. Thanks to all of you who gave the inputs and to the discussion. I think there were a lot of great questions. And Rebecca, I think you can do the last word.
We are also, of course, joining this Circular Futures Festival as HYVE. Would be nice to see some of you there as well. And thanks so much to all our speakers for really inspiring us with so many, I think, very concrete takeaways. And I think really starting. There's so much out there, there's so much knowledge, so much technology, to really start using that and implementing that together systemically. And I think that's always really motivational, to see, you know, people who are really hands-on pushing that forward. So thank you so much. I hope everyone who joined here feels as inspired as I do. And with that, I wish you a great evening, and I hope you leave energized with a lot of willingness to change things in the status quo. And hopefully see you next time on our next talk, which will be probably end of September, October. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.